Let's take a look at your market news now. Asian shares scaled 3-month highs this morning as a surprise bounce in Chinese manufacturing activity eclipsed doubts raised by a Bloomberg News report over whether the United States and China can reach a long-term trade deal. Factory activity in China expanded at its fastest pace in more than 2 years in October as export orders and production rose, a private business survey showed. Now, only the Nikkei was in negative territory, losing 0.33% to end at 22,850 points. The Shanghai Composite was lifted 1% to end the day at 2,958 points. The Hang Seng also ended the trading day 0.75% in the green, rising to 27,102 points. US stocks fell last night as conflicting tones surrounding a possible trade deal between the US and China eclipsed those strong earning reports from both Apple and Facebook. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell over 0.5% to 27,046 points. The S&P 500 lost 0.33% to 3,037 points, while the Nasdaq Composite dropped 0.1% to 8,292 points. Let's get more on the markets now. We're across to Alabide Gomedia, who's standing by at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. A very good afternoon to you, Alabide. Markets maybe on 10 talks waiting for that Moody's decision. What else is moving the markets?
Yeah, certainly a whole lot of nervous Nellies, if we can call it that here at the JSE, of course, with investors perhaps a little bit more awkward in terms of their trading, awaiting the big news. So that just means that Monday's trade will certainly tell the big story. The Rand as well, perhaps sitting in between positive gains for the day and perhaps a few losses as well. Considering that Moody's does come out with that announcement, it is supposedly going to happen around 10 p.m. South African time, because it should come out at 4 p.m. New York time, plus minus, or it could be a little bit earlier as well. We do tend to find that they swap it and change it as they will as well. So it will be of keen interest to find out. Of course, Finance Minister Tito Mboweni even saying that it does not look good for South Africa's credit rating, with even Fitch having come out and said that we had not gone far enough when it comes to South Africa's medium-term budget policy statement. So all of that will certainly be a key fixture and a poignant point for South Africa when it comes to the market movement over the next couple of days. And of course, internationally, we are seeing manufacturing activity as well out of China. That seems to have picked up ever so slightly. So there was a sense of buoyancy out in that Asian market, as you pointed out, in Zinga a little bit earlier on. But of course, the questions around the US-China trade negotiation, as that seems to be falling a little bit by the wayside. Chinese officials are perhaps a little more worried whether they'll be able to strike a long-term deal with the US and indeed with President Donald Trump. All of that, and of course Brexit is still playing its part, a whole host of issues certainly taking the market by storm. For now though, let's unpack those numbers exactly as the global stage sits, and then we'll get into the details right after this. So as you can tell, then obviously a mixed picture when it comes to that market movement. Then Warwick Lucas joining us now from Galileo Capital right here at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Let's unpack that market movement with him. Warwick, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it. Pleasure. Generally not much to write home about for the JSE. A lot of nervous hands, a lot of nervous investors. Today really determines a lot about what happens with South Africa's credit rating, I suppose, in future. But some would say we're already trading, with a downgrade in mind already. So perhaps we shouldn't be so nervous.
Well, I think we are part of the way towards discounting a downgrade. I mean, to put it in perspective, our peak foreign holdings or foreigners' holding of South African bonds was around about 43% a few years back. But before we were investment grade at all, there was a level of around about 32% holding, and we're currently at 36%. So quite a lot of people who were going to get out have gotten out. But that's not to say that if we did get downgraded, downgrade, well, if you get another 4% heading the exits fast, it can certainly get a bit disruptive and bumpy for a while.
Yeah, and it could knock South Africa quite a bit. We head into an investment conference next week as well that the president is hoping to get a whole lot of money into. The budget seemingly pointed that negative picture. That certainly, as we've noticed, spilled over into even the local currency. Where do we perhaps find the small gains, if any? And how bad are things, I suppose, right now? Or are we just all being pessimistic?
Look, I think it's as our previous guest said, it's going to be a bit of a tight one. I certainly agree with that sentiment. I mean, we are down to the wire, and I think what is also important though is the conduct of our finance minister. I think it's refreshing to have someone in that post who really doesn't pull any punches, says it like it is, and I think he's got put out one of the more credible plans and processes to try and get matters right. So I think that may get taken into account by Moody's.
But it was a completely bleak picture though, right? 70% debt of as a portion of GDP, growth only 0.5% this year. Things are getting absolutely worse when it comes to things like unemployment as well. We're going to help Eskom out for another couple of years as well. It just seems that, yes, he pointed out to the bad news, but it doesn't seem that we're going to move ourselves exactly in the direction we really want over the next few years.
I think the most important key message that came out, and perhaps he was leaning on it quite hard, was business as usual cannot carry on.
Yeah.
And one of the most important things that he pointed out there, which was something that economists actually have over a number of years pointed towards, and finally the ruling party seems to have accepted the problem, was that rising real wages within the state were a serious problem, and they do need to be dealt with.
And I suppose that's the question at mind at heart now, I suppose. How much of that rand will depend really on what Moody's say tonight? Sitting 1510, we were at around 1460 odd before the budget speech, and we had thought perhaps some positivity for now. But now 1510 could get even worse.
Yeah, it could very much so. I mean, quite apart from anything else, the dollar itself looked a little bit soggy the last few days. So, yeah, I mean, the rand could take some more heat regardless.
Are you taking any hope into tonight? Are you hoping that we get perhaps a respite where there's no mention, there's no change in our outlook, no change in our credit rating? Or are you more of the opinion that we do get a credit outlook change, or is there a full-on downgrade?
I think a full-on downgrade is a pretty remote possibility. I think Moody's have been pretty in depth as to how they communicating the process that they will go through.
Yeah.
I think the key question is whether they say, right, well, we can afford to kick the can down the road here, or are we actually getting painted into a corner here? And I think that's the key question, and that's really, once again, that's why it's actually going to be a really close run affair.
Look, that's certainly been the big news point, of course, across this week. Just very finally, and something we touched on very briefly as well, just wanted to get your thoughts on Starbucks being sold then for 7 million rand to a consortium. Taste Holdings not feeling the taste for it anymore, and finally waking up to smell the coffee, I suppose, in this one, and saying, yeah, we can't hold this one any longer.
Well, you left all the puns. I guess it's a case that they're running up the white flag or serviette, as the case may be, and letting someone with deeper pockets take over the project, and I think that's the right way to go.
Yeah, certainly would hurt if you continue to hold the business. You need around 700 million rand in order to make companies just like Domino's Pizza or the likes really become more positive, and they need to add a whole lot more stores. So certainly Taste Holdings saying they do not have the appetite and the ability to be able to turn all those companies and generate cash positive cash flows from them either. So certainly, unfortunately, a situation where we're seeing Starbucks being sold off to a consortium that actually includes one of the directors from Taste Holdings itself. So quite interesting on that front, when all the others are saying that the fast food area is perhaps one to look into right now. For now, though, that is where the buck stops.